I recently had the opportunity to sit down with Reverend Mary Beth Eberle. She's the pastor at Grace United Methodist Church in Jackson, Tennessee. And what's exciting is the thread that the Foundation for Evangelism has throughout her ministry. She began as a student, and then she took what she learned as a student, brought her to her congregation. Through that work with her congregation, she was able to write a successful grant proposal and receive one of our Equipping the Local Church grants. And it's been exciting to watch this journey, and I'm excited to share this conversation with you today.
My name is Mary Beth, and I'm a United Methodist pastor serving a small church in Jackson, Tennessee. And I first encountered the work of the Foundation for Evangelism when I was in a seminary class at Garrett Evangelical. And the work that we did in that class to empower congregations for evangelism was just too good and too crucial for me to hold just in my brain. And when I found out that there was a webinar that I could lead my congregation through, we convinced probably about 12 people that they needed to come alongside and learn this training. And it was so, so rich, because this isn't a program, this isn't a prescription. The way the foundation empowers laity also teaches clergy how to be good leaders in this system, because we are, as clergy, in theory, supposed to be making ourselves obsolete. We are supposed to be training disciples who can then train more disciples. So when we come to the Foundation for Evangelism and we go through these webinars, we have an opportunity to help people understand their faith, share their faith, and do everything authentically and out of their strength. And that is one of the things that I am most amazed by with the work from the Foundation, because it's not a cheesy program. It's not one size fits all. It's not something that you can try and say you failed. It is something that helps your congregation discover their identity and their passion for serving. And it generates excitement that snowballs into more excitement in sharing God's goodness with other people.
So Mary Beth, you probably didn't even know about the Foundation when you first came in contact with the work of the Foundation.
No, I had no idea even who E. Stanley Jones was. Right. I know now.
Right. So take us back. So how many years ago were you in Mark Teasdale's
It
class?
was January of 2021, and it was Empowering Congregations for Evangelism was the name of the course. And he referenced what was then his most recent book, which is Evangelism for Non-Evangelists. Really good resource. And from there, I don't know if I found you guys on the Garrett Continuing Ed website. I'm not sure exactly how I found you, but I saw where there was going to be a webinar about that book. And my congregation was in such a spot that I knew that I wanted to at least bring some of my leaders into that training. Through that training, we found out about the grant, and at this point, we're about midway through administering that grant.
So just going back to that original class with Mark Teasdale on evangelism, how did that course transform or impact your personal understanding of evangelism?
So I knew that to be faithful, you had to go and do evangelism. I also knew that a lot of what we understand evangelism to be at best is swarmy, and at worst it's manipulative and not at all effective. So I knew that things needed to be authentic, and I knew that we needed to be faithful. And I was hoping, and I wasn't disappointed, I was hoping that that course would help bridge that gap. Because I'd gone out and I'd done things that came out of a charismatic tradition where we would go and we would meet people and we would expect God to be in those conversations. But the piece of how to help other people be confident in that, if they're not, especially from a charismatic tradition, tell a Methodist to go talk to a stranger, may or may not go over well, depending on who they are. So to have the skills and the knowledge and the insight and just the history of even the Wesleyan evangelism, to help us do evangelism well in our tradition, it was one of the most valuable courses I had, really.
That's great. So one of the remarkable things you were able to do was to have the majority of your congregation also be exposed to the evangelism for non-evangelist material. If you could just share a little bit about how that came to be and what that work, intentional work, and commitment of having them go through that, how that helped to change the trajectory of the ministry at Grace.
So we had, like a lot of congregations, various histories with evangelism and attempts at evangelism that were uncomfortable, inauthentic. And I really started kind of almost with pastoral care and recognizing the discomfort, recognizing how awkward it was. We did a Family Feud game where the number one answer for what Methodists would rather do other than evangelism was anything else. Like the number one answer, what would you rather do than evangelism? Literally anything else. So we started just naming that and then working toward undoing definitions and the pastoral care of assuring people that I'm not going to ask them to do something that they would not want done to them. Which the idea of using the golden rule in evangelism, how novel. So when we got there, I realized that in order for them to engage in these ideas and actually begin to see themselves as evangelists, they needed the same language I had. They needed to understand why we're doing this. What is it that we are inviting people to besides Sunday worship? And that discipleship piece, for some reason, is missing in a lot of places. To have people able to explain God's goodness in passing, I call it the Walmart test. If somebody asks you in Walmart something about Christianity, can you be conversant? And a surprising number of people, I think, would be terrified of that. So to bring them through the training to, especially the Evangelism for Non-Evangelists course, to help them have the steps of the evangelism equation, to understand that we're not trying to copy and paste whatever megachurch is doing. We're going to do something that only Grace can do, and only Grace can do really well. And when that piece started coming through, people began to be excited about it. And we had our youth leader, we had our lay leader, we had most of the committee leadership somehow involved in the training. If they didn't take the training, they were reading the book. And if they weren't reading the book, they heard about it in Sunday sermons. So it really helped kind of heal the wounds of failed attempts. Because people want to be faithful. People want to be good Christians. They know, whatever your tradition is, that some iteration of the Great Transmission. Some iteration of the Great Commission is the word. Some iteration of the Great Commission is part of being faithful, and they want to do that. But we discovered that in general, people aren't terrible at evangelism. They're terrible at being inauthentic. And helping us get to a place where we could authentically share God's goodness out of our strengths, that training was the missing piece for us.
That's great. So at the foundation, one of the things that we're embarking on is to provide greater opportunities for congregational teams, lay and clergy together, to receive training that help them to be able to tell their story, to understand their strengths, to listen well to their community, and to develop those authentic practices. But that's an investment.
It is.
So what makes it worth the time and investment of taking these additional steps as opposed to just trying the latest program?
I know that for my context, this allows it to be holistic, and I know we throw that word around a lot, but it really is an element of pastoral care, of helping people come along with you rather than trying to prescribe something that will fail, and then it gives people a reason not to try again. So to invest the time, and it's, the course is about 6 weeks. In our case, it took us a little over a year to get to the place where we were ready to really implement these things. It takes that long to unlearn bad habits. And we still kind of have to reframe the definition of evangelism and reframe what we're doing when we talk about outreach, because those words mean things to people that are not good practices. They're not helpful. They're not going to share God's goodness. They're going to lay on guilt trips, or they're going to be weird and awkward, and people are going to find reasons not to. So to put in the time, to put in the effort to learn something that helps people operate out of their strength and that helps snowball into something that is exciting and it's compelling, and it becomes almost self-replicating when people have a foundation of why are you somebody who claims Jesus? Why is that something worth inviting other people to? It takes a bit to get people conversant, to have the Walmart level language where you can just chat with somebody at the grocery store about these things and not feel like you can only give Sunday school answers, or worse, feel like you can't even give a Sunday school answer. So it is a very useful thing in that it's pastoral care, it's discipleship, it's Great Commission in a single process. And we don't always do a good job at integrating those things.
Yeah. So at the Foundation for Evangelism, we firmly believe that the local church is the key place where disciples are made, and it's God's vessel for transforming the world. As a pastor in the United Methodist Church that requires clergy to move periodically, you probably will not be at Grace for all of your career. As you think about moving to other churches, how do the skills and the framework that you've developed in this process leading Grace through their projects, how will that translate, or what will you be able to take to future appointments?
I remember on my grant application putting in the phrase, "This is itinerancy proof." And the way that we structured the grant that we received, it really is something that the laity should be leading. There are places where I've had to step in. We've had some leadership shifts and things like that. When I began this process, I actually was serving 2 little tiny country churches with, between the 2 of them, maybe 20 people. So the lovely thing about this is whether I go back to serving in a really rural area, whether I'm in a suburban setting like I am now, whether I go into an urban setting, the way that the evangelism is framed through this process, through the Foundation's work, there's almost no way to not draw from the strengths of the people that are in front of you. I think that's one of the things that we fall short on sometimes, is that instead of lifting up and building on the strengths of the people in front of us, we spend a lot of time lamenting who we don't have or what we don't have. Oh, we can't do that because we don't have this money or these people or this excitement or this energy. And the way that the Foundation's work has formed me as a leader and my church as disciples, that wondering what we have or don't have is not part of the process. You really can pull from the strengths of a tiny church with a mostly older population, a growing church with a lot of younger people. The ability to contextualize your ministry is one of the most valuable parts of this experience for us.
Thank you. You shared a lot about the partnership with laity and how important they are as the priesthood of all believers. They're the folks that were there before you got to your setting and will be there after you're gone. So if you could just say a little bit more about what that's looked like in your setting to not even just empower, but just to release them to serve and use their gifts.
It took a while. So we live in a world where things come quickly. Within 2 days, you can have almost anything delivered to your house, depending on where you live. It takes a while to get there. So I want to make that clear at the start. But once people, this is the snowball thing, once people see a little bit of success, they get excited and they start bringing ideas. And we had, this is our first year serving as a youth minister. She's a youth director at our church. She came to me with an idea. I didn't even have to think about whether or not it would work. She was excited about it. She had the skills to make it happen. And the whole risk-taking part of evangelism, sure, go ahead, let's see what happens. And I didn't have to plan it. I didn't have to, it was just a green light to let her go. We've had a similar situation with our community garden. We have somebody who's in the process of becoming a master gardener who came to me and said, okay, so we have the vegetable beds, but what if we grew cut flowers and took them to farmer's market? Like, okay, see what happens. And it's really exciting to see the what ifs kind of taking off through the congregation. hey, maybe we should, or what if we did this? And knowing that they're willing to take a risk. Maybe it won't work. Not the end of the world. There's just a freedom and a joy that we see from the laity when they've had these kind of stacked experiences and these little bits of success that lead to energy for more risk-taking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what I appreciate, especially, none of the churches that you've pastored have been large. And I think a lot of times people look to the mega churches or the large churches or lament, we can't be like them. Right. But what you've been able to do is to find the things that they can do well that make a difference. So what other words of encouragement or hope would you offer to other smaller congregations about the difference they can make?
I think the smaller churches have an advantage. In the setting that we're in now, I think for a lot of churches, people are not connected, they're lonely. And to find a home, to find a community where people are known and loved, in and of itself is so valuable. And small churches have that to offer, and they don't always see that as an asset. They see who used to come or what we used to be able to do when we had better funding or what we could be if only. But Jesus started with 12. It doesn't take that many people. It takes people who are faithful and who are willing to use their strengths. And I don't know, I think it's almost more fun in a small church because for me as a pastor, I get to witness the fruit a lot more firsthand. I don't have a committee reporting to me about this. I get to see it. So there's just a joy and a contentment and a fulfillment in watching it happen among people that you know very well. And it's probably fun to serve a mega church. I don't know yet, but I can say that that's one of the really thrilling parts of serving a smaller church.